So in line with that, just to kind of connect this to your textbook, that warm demander is in many ways that secure attachment that we're talking about. So just to define that warm demander a little further, it's somebody who can convey warmth, right? You come into the room, you know, you're kind, you're smiling, you might bring a kind sense of humor. You ask caring questions if you see somebody who's not doing well. Hey, how are you doing today? I noticed you look, you know, you're not eating as much of your lunch. Are you feeling sick today? Or maybe they're sitting by themselves, maybe they were crying and you can see tear streaks down their face, you know, whatever it might be. You really show genuine care. And then, like he already mentioned before, that unconditional positive regard. You have belief in your students, and it has to be genuine, because if you don't honestly believe in them, they will know, and they will see you as fake, and you will not become that safe place anymore. And so actually, just as a tip and as a practical aspect, something that I would do every year, because I worked, as I've mentioned before, in a high risk school, with most of them had high incidence disability. Many had, it was either two spectrums, either high anxiety and depression, or externalized behaviors, aggression, throwing things, criminal traits of behavior that they were moving into. And this is kind of their last stop before they headed into that juvenile situation. So this was huge to really just think, no matter what was happening with them each day, to just really say, you know what, you come into my room day one, and I would say, I'm so glad you're here. I understand that you may not have had the best experiences with school in the past. I understand that school is stressful and that some teachers are, you know, give you a hard time. But I just want you to know right now that I believe in you, that I'm here to, I will fight for you to the nth degree. I will make sure that I will give you every strategy that I know to make sure you're successful. But what I need from you is, I need you to put in your part. I need you to work hard. I need you to be respectful in this classroom. And I set my expectations, right? So you are, at the same time, when they walk in the door, you're saying, hey, I care for you. I will be there for you. I want to make sure you're successful in this classroom. But here's the high expectation. I need you to, you know, keep following these rules and do your work and all these other things. So the thing is, with students, a lot of times they aren't going to believe you until they see it. So they're going to wait until they, you know, something goes completely wrong. Are you still going to be there for them, even if the day before they, you know, ripped up your papers, and today they're back in the classroom? Can you start fresh with them today and see the best in them? I also found that it's really good when it talks about this belief in your students. Find the positive. Even if there's only one thing out of 1,000, and you can only think like, this student drives me crazy. I mean, teachers get to this point really where they think, I don't want to come to school today because I'm afraid this student's going to do A, B, C, and D. Find one positive thing about them and reaffirm them. It's positive reinforcement. That's a behavioral term even. You know what? I had a student, Jarian, you are an amazing, you're just an amazing writer. You know, the way that you can convey emotion, and I think you could be a great creative writer, and you should really look into this. And you will see that student blossom and grow in that area, and you know, they will take root in an area where you speak. If you speak, you're stupid, you're ignorant, all that's what they're going to remember, and that's the direction they're going to head. So speak positive, you know, speak what's good about them.
And definitely taking that from someone who sees the other side of these kids, who sees kids who often are not receiving that in any space at all, not receiving any of that belief. That one person that does believe in them, I tell you what, it makes them literally grow exponentially more than you could ever imagine or see. And it's one of the best parts of my job is when you do see someone, whether it is from me or from someone who is, and it's often more influential inside of a classroom. Whenever I've heard a teacher say those kinds of things, their mental health blooms. Like, you see them be able to regulate, you see them be able to believe in themselves. Their self-worth is now taking a turn for the good, and
Mm-hmm.
watching them believe in themselves is just, it's awesome. So I think that's a really good point.
Yeah, I mean, even one thing, you can see one thing that you highlight can turn a student around, and they become your loyal students. You know, you see a lot less behavior when you take this approach because they're very loyal to you and they want to be the student that you see them as, really. So it's a great technique to even use behaviorally, and plus it changes their lives. But that third point there is just talking about personally as teachers resetting when necessary. And I think I mentioned this before, or we will mention this in a little bit, how to address this. I'm going to move forward for right now, and we'll touch that here in a minute. But I did have a fifth question for you. In learning that we have this important role as teachers, what can we do to actively help our students?
I think a lot of it you've kind of mentioned here just in the last little bit of being able to really take a positive trait of a student and be able to encourage that in them. It requires you to be observant and to be someone who creates a space. Specifically, thinking of something that's tangible, I would say inside of a classroom, it's really essential to be able to provide as much consistency as you can, to provide a safe space and provide that empathic care by remaining an observant individual who is attuned to their learning process and sees their growth and sees their goodness inside of them. And one of the really big pieces to that and the really tangible steps, like is shown on this slide right here, is being able to be aware of signs of anxiety, depression, just a general mental health issue. And these can really, it really varies. So that's why there's a lot of them on this slide. There's a lot of symptoms and signs, and that they look different in each person, even within our own selves. It takes a lot for us to even recognize those within ourselves.
Yeah.
And some of these that are posted up here are recurring fears and worries, changes in behavior such as irritability, and that's often more the externalized behaviors where a kid will, like the example you said earlier, Dr. Jones, was that they would like throw a book or they would start yelling at the teacher. It's more externalized behavior. Avoiding social interactions. This could look like sitting alone at lunch or not wanting to be a part of the group that you see them being a part of often. Dropping grades or school avoidance. So when you see a student and their grades start dropping, it is often to do with an external source rather than about their own academic ability. Also, trouble concentrating, substance use, and chronic complaints, such as fatigue, headaches, and one of the most common that I see specifically is stomach aches. So,
yeah.
And that's one of the ways. And then some of the other ways that I want to mention here too, that are tangible, that I believe teachers can really make a difference in students' lives and become more aware of their students, is to talk with the kids about potential stressors. It means a lot for teachers to be able to strike up a conversation, to be able to have the bravery to step into the students' lives and say, hey, I noticed something's different. I noticed something's off and you're not your chipper self like you have been in the last few days. Is there something going on and do you need to talk? I have some free time at lunch, or just offering that space for them in that way to be able to talk about their stressors. And then also being mindful of the expectations you set for kids and teens. This can be a kind of a difficult balance, I know, for educators, because there's still a standard that you have to uphold, and at the same time, what is that line and that balance that you can feel out for yourself of the grace you can provide for students who are going through a lot or going through different instances that do call for more of a leniency for them. And lastly, talking with them about social media use. And I find this to be one of the most important topics to be able to talk about. This is a growing concern, being able to have cyberbullying that is happening and is one of the leading causes for teens' suicidal ideation to this day. It is one of the bigger parts, and the words that people use online impact their day-to-day, the present moments, and it's something that sometimes I believe that the education system, as well as even just the clinical realm, has a little bit ill-equipped to handle, because it's such a new thing, social media and having this cyberbullying that's happening. So I definitely see that that's a really big one.
It's true because a lot of times you all might see this as well that when you're behind a screen, you feel a lot more freedom to say whatever you want because you don't have to look someone in the eye and, and say it to their face. So you have students who are saying terrible things to other kids and they're thinking they don't have any of that actual was it empathy or that compassion by looking in them in the eye and saying that. So this student's over here may be upset. And you remember there was some kind of a rule. I don't think it's maybe a statistic, but for every one negative thing that someone says, it takes, potentially 7 positive that to counteract that. And if they're constantly either getting direct bullying or they're just comparing themselves saying, oh, that girl went on this nice vacation or she's prettier than me or they got more likes than me, that's all negative thoughts as well, even if it's not direct.
And our
And
brains, like physically, sorry if I'm cutting you off
yeah, go
there,
ahead.
our brains are physically built to look for negatives.
Mm-hmm.
We're meant to look for how can we protect ourselves as humans to be able to survive as an actual animal, to be able to be like, I need to survive. I need to make sure I'm not going to be, I'm going to be able to make it. And so when we look towards those negative things, our mind, even though it's in its kind of primal set of looking for the negatives, it starts looking for that emotionally, and specifically social media being constantly always there and being something that is an addiction for most people, being able to sit
Mm-hmm.
there and be like, oh, this dopamine release when this like red dot pops up on my
Yep.
Instagram or something that happens like that. It's like a repeated seeing something and repeated thoughts that can become very negative very quickly.
And
And
cause that neurological pathway to just continue to head down that direction. And I
yes,
wanted to mention, I know this is a tougher topic, but I think you all need to be aware of this, elementary, middle, and high, that there is a lot of pressure for students. They'll have students, there's a lot of inappropriate things going on, per se. So students asking other students to send them pictures, that a student sends an inappropriate picture to one student and then that student sends it across the whole school after they become enemies and it also can just devastate their life. They get suicidal, the depression comes in, anxiety. So, and I know you mentioned something, I think this is a law that is, I don't know if everybody knows about it, but I think it's very important that kids need to know. Can you explain a little bit about that?
yeah, yeah, even in the instance that you're talking about, say there's a 14-year-old who has been getting to know a 17-year-old, and the 17-year-old, um, let's say the 17-year-old is a boy, and say they are attracted to girls, and so the 14-year-old is the girl, and the boy sends a picture of himself that's inappropriate to the 14-year-old girl, and the girl's like, hey y'all, look at this picture that he just sent to me. Technically, her sending that to another person is distribution of child pornography, um, and vice versa. Either way around, it can be distribution of pornography and can be a criminal offense
Mm-hmm.
for them. And the same thing goes for if there's intimate relationships that are happening between younger kids, teens, and adolescents. So let's say there's like a 13-year-old that's getting to know a 16-year-old and they have an intimate interaction, and that is something that they tell someone about, that's actually, and they come to me about that, that's something that I have to realize there's rules and laws that are called statutory rape laws, where though they both were consensual, it's something that it's still against the law, and it's something that goes down as a criminal offense as well.
Yeah.
So
So just I will only bring that up just to say kids I don't think are thinking about this because in social media culture, it's just seeming so common nowadays that it's and so easy for them just to send things around to engage in acts that aren't legal and they could actually get criminal charges for this when it comes to either all their friends and a parent reports it or it comes to a counselor, a therapist. So it's really important that kids understand the power of this and this is something that can lead them to more devastation in their early childhood.
yeah, and I do want to mention kind of a little side note here, a little footnote, that those laws vary from state to state. So
Mm-hmm.
depending on those things, it's really important for educators as well as clinicians to be up to date on what those laws are for who can be having those sexual encounters with who, at what age, those kinds of things. That's just kind of like a little footnote I wanted to add there.
Yes. And we
Uh,
never would have thought, that we needed to talk about this, but it's happening at all kinds of ages these days. I remember I did some teaching in a fourth grade classroom, and these situations were happening in the back of the bus at such a very young age. So even if you're an elementary teacher, you have to know that you just have to be aware of signs, and it usually comes out in a lot of anxiety, stress. Kids start talking. If a kid brings you a situation, you have to report it and know what to do with that. So as a teacher, you have, there's a lot behind the scenes that people don't typically teach you in a college setting. And that I'm kind of breaking the mold in that, because I want you to be prepared, and I want you to know what to do when these difficult situations come to you, because the likelihood of it happening is very, very high. So yeah, thank you for going through that and helping us understand, for them, what's legal and what's not. And it's all coming through social media more than likely than not.
Yeah, of course. And I do want to also highlight just kind of a subtle balance in that equation, because there's not just one thing that's super bad and one that's super good. I think social media can be a positive as well
Oh, for
in
sure.
people's lives, and it can be a connection point for people. And so, not to discount that, but still, like we're talking about, it's something that in my line of work, it's often a negative encounter for me, just being a clinician who does work with people who are very impacted by negative comments and different difficulties that happen on social media.
I
So
think that's why we have, as teachers, have to model good behavior and teach them, because if they don't know these things, the only way they're going to find out is, through figuring it out, trial and error, through the fire, unless their parents are very active, which sometimes parents just don't know enough about this to even talk to their kids to say, hey, here's what's okay and here's what's not. So sometimes as teachers, we have to set those boundaries, especially for our classroom. We definitely do. I wanted to go back one slide and just bring this up as well, that when we're talking about these externalized and internalized behaviors, remember the three different types of the functions that we talked about. So there's attention, escape, right? And then there is the access to the tangible. So when we're thinking about, changes in irritability, where they might throw something or cuss you out or bite or, those different things, remember that there's always the why. So yes, there are all these other factors going on that you can say, hey, what's going on? But in that exact moment, they're either wanting to probably escape your classroom because they're feeling very anxious in there, or maybe they're trying to get your attention, say, hey, please, I'm lost, I'm drowning right now, please look at me. So keep in mind that when these things happen, there's a why, and it's about connecting the dots. You're kind of like an investigator looking at the things we're talking about plus the behavioral aspects. I think you're going to be in really good shape when you're in the classrooms. And in talking about this too with potential stress, these are two things I wanted to hit on before, and we're getting close to point 6, so we're wrapping up soon. But I always think of it, and I think I talked about this to you all before, this iceberg, right? So you mentioned something before to me that I thought was really interesting with the submarine. Can you talk about that? Because I really like that analogy.
yeah, I think you bring up a really good point about the iceberg metaphor or visual, is that those fears and angers, aggressions, the externalized behaviors that sit at that top of the iceberg, they can be the easiest things to see, and then we want to react right away to it. We'll make a different action to be able to try to interact with those fears and angers and maybe even react ourselves, when really it really does take us to be able to offer these students and these kids to be able to say, here, like, I have a raft here, let's pause, let's look at it, let's pause, and then maybe we can even explore what's on the underneath of this iceberg. And the analogy that I often say is that there's a submarine, and maybe we can be the submarine to help them kind of go underneath and be like, what's happening underneath here for a second? What's going on and causing these fears and these angers? And it's really good for our own selves too here, to be able to recognize when we're feeling those emotions and be able to take ourselves to the bottom of the iceberg and see what's below here really that's happening. So
Yeah, absolutely. There's always the why. And sometimes when we can't self-monitor, we talked about students don't have a secure attachment, so they don't know how to monitor their behaviors. They don't know that, hey, I'm feeling really scared or upset, and it's coming out in the form of anger. Like teaching them how to recognize what emotion's happening and then what to do with it. Because like just like you're talking about with the submarine.
Yeah, regulating, being able to regulate your emotions. And I think that I wanted to mention one more thing
Sure.
too about the tangible steps. And this kind of leads us to question 6 as I'm looking at it is I think one of the last and most important crucial things is being able to be the best you in these spaces and maintain the demeanor and heart for the kids you are working with. And I recognize that that takes a lot of work. And that does lead us to the next question, which I will.
You already saw it, so you can go ahead and you saw my question. It's all good.
What was it again? Would you mind going to that
Sure.
one?
Yeah, I'll go ahead and ask it. So, how can we maintain our mental health as teachers? So, we have so many challenges. We have stress, we have documents due, we have administrators telling us things that, are late or what they need more of. How do
Yeah.
we stay sane enough, to react appropriately, just to put that very bluntly, on those very stressful days? How do we do it?
Yeah, mental health is just as crucial among educators. It's not just for the students, it's not just for the kiddos, it's for the educators and the people who are doing the work as well. And it's so, 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 so important. I think another part of the teacher experience that really does go underappreciated is the patience it takes to manage a room of children and adolescents going through many different things from many different backgrounds and at all different levels of functionality. And so it takes so much to be able to have that patience and be able to be there. And of course, saying this, I know that we have all flipped our lid at one point. We've gotten really upset and really mad at the people that we've been with, or and in this case, I'm sure there's a lot of teachers and teachers that I've spoken with too that have really gotten upset with their students, and it's inevitable. It's going to happen. We're not perfect. We ourselves have things going on in our lives. I mean, especially being in this time era right now that we're in, 2020 is full of a lot of intensity and a lot of traumas that are happening all around. And so it can be really hard to maintain that positivity and that goodness for ourselves. And I think one thing that is really, really important in that is in an active step in that is to encourage people who are in high stress situations, including you all who will become part of the education system, is to prioritize self-care and time for self-awareness. This means that you do want to start familiarizing yourself with what burnout looks like, and specifically what burnout looks like for yourself when you start feeling far away, or you come to work and you're like, oh, I just don't want to be here anymore, like with this work and this job, and I don't want to help this student that's like raising their hand. And those are really crucial things to pay attention to within our own selves when we start feeling that when we're helping and in this helping career and helping profession. And it's so, so important that we maintain good self-care. And I could say that over and over again, self-care is so, so, so crucial. And one thing that I want to continue to hope and challenge inside of people who are going into this education career, as well as even clinicians, is as you're growing towards being part of it, what are you doing to develop ways to care for yourself? And specifically questions like, are you becoming aware and how are you becoming aware of what or who pushes you over the edge? And also, what are some of the ways you notice help you regain your calm? Do you have techniques? Do you know breathing techniques? Do you know ways to like pause and say, like, I think you had mentioned, Dr. Jones, a little bit earlier of like, I'm going to leave the classroom and I'm going to ask my colleague to say like, step in for me. I need to walk away from this because that's best for me. Self-care can look like a billion things, and it's really crucial to be able to know what it looks like for you and your unique way of needing it. As well as for self-awareness, the more that you grow in knowing yourself, the more that you'll be able to know when you've reached your limit, when you need that break, and also how to model those positive ways to handle and regulate yourself, which kind of ties back into the the secure attachment, being able to be that secure base for students and be able to help them see what it looks like to regulate themselves in those spaces.
Yeah, absolutely. Because I mean, this is huge, and I want to lead in to that same point. I know self-care, I know can sometimes have a stigma to it. It might sound weak or think, oh, just that's just petty. But you have to think about it. Whenever you get on an airplane, what do they tell you to do when the oxygen mask falls? Put on your own the oxygen mask first, and then assist others. So it's no different with being a teacher, because I can tell you from experience, after you go and you're just so motivated and zealous, and you work long hours because it's your first couple years as a teacher. You go spend extra time, and the next thing you know, you grade at home, you work late, you really just get to eat, sleep, and maybe see if you have a family or kids around you, or a spouse, or your friends, whoever, you see them very minimally, you're going to start to burn out. So think about setting times when you become a teacher. Say, okay, from this time to this time every week, I'm going to this workout class, or I'm going to cook when I go home, or I'm going to go see friends, or do stuff that you like, and make sure you do it and make that a priority. Because if you don't take care of yourself, you're going to, at some point, maybe not immediately, get to the point where you're snapping and you're, like you said, flipping your lid because you're just over your limit. So it's very important to take care of yourself. So here are a couple of strategies that I found are very helpful as a teacher. One thing is, if you do make a mistake and you do, snap at a student and say something harshly, or, come across rude, just say, hey, I'm so sorry. I thought about that. I really shouldn't have said that to you. I shouldn't have been harsh, and whatever the situation may be, it's okay to apologize, because that's modeling to them when they make a mistake to apologize. And same if you make a mistake in front of the classroom. Let's say you you say something incorrectly, or you, whatever it may be, just say, oh, we all make mistakes at times and we have to learn, we just do better the next time. Model that for them, because then they learn that that's okay to redirect themselves. Also, it's good to have a supportive team. You can't always guarantee that, because you can't choose your school or your admin or your teacher colleagues. But if you have a very supportive administration, rely on them, talk to them, let them help you. I'd say build good rapport with your co-teachers and just teachers in the school, because those are people that you can talk to. Or like he talked about before, if you have a co-teacher, say, hey, I need to step out for a minute. I am at level 10 on the anchor scale. You don't have to say it like that, but in your mind, you're thinking, I'm about to snap. Have someone step in, because I'm going to say this and be blunt once again. I like to give you all the reality as much as possible as what happens in the school system. There are too many cases in the news where a teacher gets to that level. And I've actually seen this in the school that I taught at, where they had a teacher that drug a student across the room because they were mad, cuss a student out, and they report it to parents. It can get to such drastic levels that you never think, if you allow yourself to, you don't regulate the steps before and say, hey, I need some self-care. I need to step away. I need to breathe, whatever it is. These are just some good strategies I want to give you so that you're prepared in your future. So right now it might seem crazy to talk about this, because when you're fresh and new, you never think that this could happen. But I want to give you every tool possible to be the best teacher you can be.
And it's even helpful too, like right now, for all the things we're going through of like this pandemic and being in the midst of social unrest and all the things that are happening around us. It's so important to even have self-care while you're in this school right now. I hope that you guys are finding a way to be able to find rest and be able to rejuvenate yourself right now as you're even in school and as you're in these classes. How are you taking care of yourself? Are you eating? Are you drinking water? Are you taking care of what needs you need? And just starting to be able to build that good, what's the word I want to use? Pattern, that good, I think pattern is the good word, pattern of being able to continue to have self-care for yourself right now.
Yeah, like a good work-life balance. You do a good job, you do everything you can, but you also have to, maintain your life as well and take care of yourself. So boundaries, right? That's always a good thing. Good.
Great
Well,
for a clinician
that's
to talk about.
right. I know that's your favorite word, right? As
Love that.
clinicians. Absolutely. So when we're looking at this, I do want to reiterate that that third point from the initial overview was to, learn how to manage problem behaviors effectively. Because at the end of the day, if you can do that, I just want to reiterate that a warm demander is not a weak person. They're not someone who just lets everything go by and it's okay, it's okay. It's somebody who is very kind, very loving, very, affirmative to students, but they also say when enough is enough. They're calm, they're consistent, they have rules, and they make sure that they're implemented. And plus, they're able to manage behavior and implement all the strategies we're going to talk about in a couple weeks. So that will also help you alleviate that burnout statistic, which 5 years for a teacher is a typical burnout rate. So if you learn the things we talk about today, plus the behavior management strategies, you're going to be in a much better place than probably 80% of teachers that are out there. So I hope you take this to heart, and I'm so glad that you've been here with us, Tyler. And I mean, this is information that doesn't often get, cross-pollinated, in another word, into the education system, and it's so necessary. So thanks for coming with us. I know you're in Seattle right now, so you're our guest from Seattle, which is pretty fun. And this is his email address in case you have any further questions for him. And you can also ask me, and I can, relay those to him as well. So, well, thank you so much for being with us today. It's been fun.
And don't hesitate to ask questions if you do need something too. I really am available. So, and I really am grateful that this is a topic that you're willing to be able to teach and have this inside of education. I think it's so pertinent and crucial, and something that I think a lot of people can benefit from.
Absolutely. At the end of the day, we want to be the best person, for ourselves, our families, and for our students, and help them, grow to become the people that they were meant to be. So
Yeah.
thank you so much. And if, like I said, if you have questions for him, let us know. Other than that, thanks for joining us, Tyler. We appreciate it.
Thank you. Bye.
All right. Bye.